6 billion people have never spoken to an AI. Let that sink in. 3 years after ChatGPT launched, 3 years after the most intuitive technology in human history became available to anyone with an internet connection, roughly 75% of the world has never typed hello into a chatbot and watched it say hello back, probably counting the ones who tried it once, asked what the weather was, and never returned. It feels like a paradox. Imagine if we discovered a cavern full of gold underneath a major city, handed out free shovels, and 6 billion people just walked past the entrance on their way to work. Why? Imagine a high-tech, mysterious package sitting on your front porch. It arrived 3 years ago. It has no return address. Most people haven't even brought it inside. They just step over it every morning to get the newspaper. They assume whatever is inside requires a screwdriver, a manual, and 3 hours of frustration to assemble. So the package just sits there, gathering dust, rain, and snow. Why haven't they opened the package? The easy answer is technophobia, but I don't think that's quite right. It's not terror. It's not that people are shaking in their boots thinking Skynet is coming for them. It's something much more banal. It's the new TV remote syndrome. If a gift arrived at your door, inside is a remote control for a brand new television, a television that could show you anything, answer anything, help with anything. You open the box, you look at the remote, you see all those buttons, you pick it up, your thumb hovers, then you do something very human. You put it back down, you pull out your phone, you open YouTube. Why? Because you already have the neural pathways for the phone. The phone offers zero friction. The remote offers a learning curve. That moment, that tiny, forgettable moment, isn't about intelligence. It's not even about technology. It's about emotion, the quiet discomfort of starting something new when the old thing still kind of works. The remote control is still in the box. For 6 billion people, it never left. Here's what might be the strangest twist in the history of innovation. AI chatbots are quite possibly the most natural interface humanity has ever created. You just talk. You type words like you would to a friend. You ask questions like you would to a colleague. There are no menus to navigate, no settings to configure, no instruction manuals gathering dust on a shelf. The learning curve is a flat line. And yet, the adoption rate suggests we've handed people something as complicated as nuclear physics. Perhaps the problem is the name itself, artificial intelligence. Those two words carry the weight of 1,000 science fiction nightmares. They conjure images of cold machines making decisions beyond human comprehension, of Terminator and HAL 9000 and every cautionary tale about the moment technology becomes too clever for its own good. The phrase suggests something alien, something fundamentally other. But consider what a chatbot actually is. A search engine that speaks in sentences instead of links. That's it. The same internet you've been using for decades, wrapped in a conversation. When you Google something, you get 10 blue links and hope one of them has your answer buried somewhere in paragraph 8. When you ask a chatbot, it just tells you. Same search, different packaging. So why the resistance? Why does something so simple feel so insurmountable to so many? I think of it like standing at the edge of a swimming pool. The water might be perfect, the temperature might be exactly right, but that first step, that moment of commitment, carries a weight disproportionate to the actual experience. It's not the swimming that scares us, it's the becoming a swimmer. There's a psychological term for this kind of inertia. Researchers call it status quo bias, our deeply embedded preference for things as they already are. But I think there's something more specific happening with technology, something I might call the burden of beginning. Every new tool asks us to become someone slightly different, not a better or worse version of ourselves, just a version that knows this new thing. And that transformation, however minor, requires energy. It requires us to admit, if only to ourselves, that there are things we don't yet understand, that our current way of navigating the world might not be the only way, perhaps not even the best way. For many, that admission is the steepest hill to climb. Not the technology itself. The technology is the easy part. If you could walk through a museum of human hesitation, you might find some fascinating exhibits. There would be a room dedicated to electricity, where families in the 1880s refused to install wires in their homes because they feared invisible currents leaking through the walls. Another wing might house the telephone, which critics warned would destroy the art of letter writing and make society superficial. You'd find a section on automobiles, those terrifying machines that early laws required to be preceded by a person waving a red flag, a display on computers, which business leaders in the 1970s dismissed as toys for hobbyists, a gallery devoted to the internet, which experts predicted would collapse under its own weight and be abandoned by the mid-1990s. In each case, the pattern holds. Revolutionary technology arrives, a small percentage of early adopters embrace it, the majority watches from a distance, and eventually, sometimes decades later, what once seemed alien becomes invisible, becomes assumed, becomes impossible to imagine life without. But how many people died having never made a phone call? How many lived their entire lives without sending an email? Not because they couldn't, not because access was denied, but because the remote control never left the box. But here's what makes our current moment different from every previous technological revolution: the pace. Electricity took 50 years to reach widespread adoption. The telephone took several decades. Personal computers had a 20-year runway before becoming household necessities. Each innovation gave society time to adjust, time to develop social norms, time for the resistant to gradually warm up or simply be replaced by generations who grew up with the technology as native as air. AI doesn't offer that luxury. The gap between experimental research project and embedded in every aspect of daily life might compress into years rather than decades. What happens to the 75% who haven't yet begun when the world they're trying to navigate assumes they already have? Imagine that tomorrow beings from somewhere beyond our understanding deliver a gift to humanity, a small device, a neural interface perhaps, something that connects directly to the mind and offers capabilities we can barely fathom. How many would try it? If history is any guide, perhaps less than 1% in the first year. The rest would watch, would wait, would cite safety concerns both real and imagined, would ask why anyone would want to be an early adopter for something so fundamentally unknown. And you know what? That caution isn't entirely irrational. There's wisdom in letting others go first, in waiting to see what happens before you leap. The problem isn't hesitation itself. The problem is when hesitation becomes permanent, when the window of being cautious closes and the window of being left behind opens. How do you know which window you're looking through? Here is where the comedy of the situation gets dark. The irony is that chatbots are, by definition, the least complicated technology ever invented. Think about the history of tools. To use a hammer, you need dexterity. To use a computer, you needed to learn typing. To use the early internet, you needed to understand URLs and browsers. To use Photoshop, you need a degree. To use a chatbot, you just say, "Hi." It is the only technology in history where the user manual is the ability to speak your native language. Yet, we branded it artificial intelligence. Words have power. Intelligence sounds heavy. It sounds like a test you didn't study for. It implies that if you talk to it, it might judge you. It implies that you need to be smart to use it. If we had called it the digital butler or the magic mirror, maybe adoption would be 99%. But because it's called AI, people treat it like a nuclear reactor, something best left to the scientists, when in reality, it's just a very well-read parrot that wants to help you write emails. We are looking at a split in the human species, not a biological one, but a functional one. There is a group that is currently learning to swim in this new ocean. They are getting faster, more efficient, and then there is the group standing on the shore, watching the water, convinced it's too cold. But technology doesn't wait for the people on the shore. By the time the 75% finally decide to dip their toes into text-based AI, maybe in 5 years, the early adopters will have already moved on. The tech giants will drop the next thing. Maybe it's AR glasses that overlay reality. Maybe it's immersive VR worlds. The people who are hesitating now will finally learn just in time for it to be obsolete. They are stuck in a loop of being perpetual tourists, always arriving at the destination just as the locals are packing up to go somewhere better. It suggests a future where the gap isn't between the rich and the poor, but between the curious and the hesitant. We might be living through one of those pivot points that future historians will mark with bold text and extended chapters. A moment when the gap between adopters and non-adopters could become genuinely consequential, not just in convenience or productivity, but in the basic ability to navigate daily life. Think about what it means to not use Google in 2024. Prefer not to use? Genuinely, never having searched for anything online. How would you find a job? Research a medical symptom? Locate a business? Navigate to a new address? The world has quietly reorganized itself around an assumption of access. AI might follow the same trajectory, only faster. What happens when employers assume candidates can use AI tools? When school assignments presume AI literacy? When customer service channels prioritize AI-comfortable users? The world doesn't wait for unanimous consent before reorganizing itself. We have to ask ourselves if we are avoiding this technology because it is dangerous or simply because it is new. Are we protecting our humanity or are we just protecting our habits? Whatever the reason, the clock is ticking. The gap is widening. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I don't know your circumstances, your reasons, your hesitations. Maybe you've already integrated AI into every corner of your life. Maybe you're one of the 6 billion who's been watching from the shore, wondering if the water is safe. What I do know is this: every major technology in human history has followed the same arc: revolutionary to mundane, terrifying to invisible, optional to assumed. And I know that somewhere in a drawer or on a shelf or in a box in a closet, there's always a remote control waiting to be unpacked. The question isn't whether you'll eventually learn to use it. The question is whether you'll learn while the learning is still gentle, or wait until the new thing comes out and you are once more one technology behind. The remote control is still in the box. For now, the choice of when to open it remains yours.